And joining us now with more on these findings and to discuss anti-Semitism and the BDS movement in the United States is human rights attorney, executive director of the Lawfare Project, and founder of End Jew Hatred Movement, Brooke Goldstein. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, we've just seen the data of this new poll that finds that among adults under the age of 30, Israel is really losing its favorable appeal. I mean, do you find this at all shocking, or is it not really much of a surprise to you?
I think there's two very significant findings in this poll. It's what you just said, and we'll discuss that in a second, but also that 84% of Americans don't know about or don't support BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And yet every single conference we do, all of our mailings, all of our effort is going towards combating this so-called BDS movement. And no, I don't find it surprising that Americans have a disfavorable view towards Israel, a foreign country engaged in a foreign conflict, because the levels of systemic Jew hatred on campus, in the media, and now even in politics with Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who are racist Jew haters, it is saturated with filth about Israel and anti-Israel lies. It's almost Orwellian. So I think if we're going to take anything away that's positive, however, from this poll, is that we have to refocus what Jewish advocacy is and start talking about the Jewish community as a minority community, which is deserved of equal protection under the law and which is subjected to systemic racism. We should not be arguing about foreign politics. We should be arguing for our rights as a minority community, just like the Black community, just like the Asian community, just like the LGBTQIA plus community does, and focus it on a civil rights issue, not a political issue about a foreign country happening thousands of miles away, but an issue that is happening within America as a minority rights issue, as a civil rights issue.
So I want to get back to that in one second, but I do want to touch upon what you mentioned and what the poll stated, that 84% of Americans do not know what the BDS movement is. Now, here in Israel, I mean, we hear a lot about the BDS movement. Through the Lawfare Project, you work directly to challenge BDS, in courts around the world. I mean, do you feel that this movement is still very much alive despite the findings of this poll?
Well, what's alive is the sentiment that underlies these type of racist movements that aim to use anything, political arguments, so-called human rights advocacy, lawfare, as a tool, media warfare, to target Jews and to target the state. And what BDS really is, and we should stop using that acronym, okay? It's illegal commercial discrimination against the Jewish people because of our race, because of our ethnicity, and because of our natural origin. And if we discussed it like that, if we went on the street and asked somebody, do you support the BDS movement? They say, well, what is that? I have to research it. What does it stand for? And I'll make a decision. But if you ask the average American, you say, do you support discriminating against someone because of their race, because of the color of their skin, because of where they're born? I guarantee you the majority of Americans would say no. So the follow-up question is, well, then do you support discrimination in any form, whether it's media warfare, whether it's economic warfare or otherwise, against the Jewish people because of our cultural and ethnic and religious identity? This is how we should be talking about the issues and phrasing the issues and bringing the notion of Jew hatred and systemic racism into the public space and start a dialogue about these issues, one that affects us as a minority community.
So do you think that rephrasing sort of the narrative or the rhetoric around anti-Semitism, around BDS, that's what's needed to combat these phenomenons?
100%. I am one of the many founders, and the Lawfare Project is one of, I think, almost 57 now organizational partners in a movement called the End Jew Hatred Movement. It's not a 501c3. It's not an organization. It's an idea. And it's a commitment to strive to end Jew hatred in our generation. Now, how do we do that besides what we spoke about, rephrasing the issue as a minority rights issue, as a civil rights issue? What we need to do is band together and unify and demand that there be consequences for Jew hatred. So one of the things that the Lawfare Project does, for example, is uses the legal system to punish and deter against acts of unlawful discrimination. We brought a lawsuit, for example, against the National Lawyers Guild, and we ended up in a very favorable settlement where we rewrote the policy, the anti-discrimination policy of the National Lawyers Guild, which had not only endorsed the so-called BDS movement, but actually carried through in a racist policy of refusing to do business with Jewish people, with Israeli people. Our lawsuit, we settled, and we not only reversed the anti-discrimination policy, but we also made it clear and forced the NLG to do business with an Israeli company. So that is how you deter. On the one hand, you advocate for the Jewish community as a minority community, but on the other hand, we must organize and unify to ensure that there are direct consequences for acts of Jew hatred, especially that which is unlawful and in violation of anti-discrimination laws.
All right, Brooke Goldstein, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
ILTV Plus, your news from Israel and more 24/7. Start your free trial today. Subscribe at iltv.tv and watch from any device.